What is up, retro movie fans? My name is Andrew Jessica, alongside the ever-so-lovely Matt Thrash. And per your votes, today we are going back in time to May 16th, 1982, to check out the horror cult classic Creepshow, directed by George A. Romero, written by Stephen King, starring Hal Brook, Leslie Nielsen, and Adrienne Barbeau. Oh, and
don't forget Ted Danson. Don't forget Stephen King, E.G. Marshall, Tom Atkins. Yeah. They're all in this.
I just took the three top stars, but no, I was just like, how'd you forget Ted Danson?
Ed Harris?
Yeah, Ed Harris. Yeah, dude. This whole thing, it's chock full of them. But with a budget of $8 million, it grossed over $21 million at the box office, making it a box office smash.
Yes.
IMDb only gave this movie 6.8 out of 10.
Wrong.
Isn't that crazy?
False.
That's nuts. It's bullshit. But yeah, IMDb gave it 6.8 out of 10. One of my absolute horror favorite films of all time. I don't know. How'd you like Creepshow?
It was one of my all-time favorites. I think this is one of the movies that got me into horror. I swear. This movie was so good.
I remember being like a kid watching this and just absolutely awesome. So yeah, it was cool. And this is going to be a little bit challenging for us to do because we have to kind of budget our time wisely. Yeah. There are 5 stories to get in touch with, 6 if you count the prologue, right? Yes. So we only have a short amount of time to talk about each one, but they're all so good, with the exception of one. And I'm going to get to it. I might have told you, but there's one of them I was just like, I can skip past this. It's not that good. But we'll go back. And a lot of people would disagree, but we'll see. So we start opening up with this awesome music, this piano baritone type music that is just going ham. And this guy is yelling at his son for what appears to be some sort of a dirty magazine or movie, and you don't know what it is. You're just like, oh man, this kid was caught with something. It could be drugs for all we know. He's done. He is in trouble. I have had many talks with my father about things like this, but nothing really could be prepared for what we got. Turns out this kid was in trouble for reading a horror comic book.
Billy was a little shit, and he goes,
I don't see how it's any worse than the books you keep in your dresser, those ones under your underwear, those sex books.
That kid, you know who that kid is?
Who?
It's the son of Stephen King.
Is it really?
Swear to God. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. This is interesting too, because this is actually Stephen King's first screenwriting job. This is not normal Stephen King stuff where it's based on a book. It wasn't based. 2 of them were based on short stories, but for the whole series or whatever, it wasn't necessarily based on a Stephen King book. It was literally his screenwriting for the movie, which is really cool, right?
Yes.
So you cut back to Billy, who is sulking in his room.
And you're right now.
You're right in hell.
Then the storm is coming, and all of a sudden, Lindsay Lohan shows up at his window, smiling, offering to take him for a drive. So, and Billy's just all excited. He's like.
Because he was going to get revenge on his father.
Yeah,
right?
He knows. Yeah. This is oh God, that old codger has it coming. The night scene turns into a cartoon, and all of a sudden we get the cartoon skeleton who then flies through the air, points at the trash can where his father disposed of the comic book. The lid pops open, and out opens Creepshow. The logo of the book then comes forward, and there you have your opening title sequence. So we open up to our very first story, which is called Father's Day.
Father's
Day. We open with a bunch of snobby-ass white people that are all drinking tea and awaiting the arrival of Aunt Bedelia. Sylvia then starts to tell a story of how Aunt Bedelia supposedly had murdered her father.
On Father's Day.
Yes. And it was, and all we know at this point was Bedelia killed her father with a marble ashtray because her father had something to do possibly with her husband's death.
Yeah, he was an asshole.
He was kind of an asshole.
That's what you did back in the 80s. You killed your father with a marble ashtray when he was an asshole.
He was an asshole. Look, and look, this is not an invite to daughters out there. Sometimes your father wants to be protective. Now, granted, did he have to blow this guy's heart out of his chest? Maybe not. But
in a hunting accident.
Right. He even had his little drink too in a hunting accident. Enter in Bedelia, who then comes up to this bouquet of flowers that are kind of hanging on, and then she focuses on the grave of her father. In Bedelia's thoughts, you then hear little bits of flashbacks of this old man's cane rapping on his chair, saying, "Where's my cake, Bedelia?
Yes, you bitch,
you
just a bunch of dirty vultures trying to get my money.
Trying to get your hands on my money."
Rich white people problems.
Rich white people problems. And this is really weird coming from Bernie Sanders. You wouldn't expect that man. Did he look like Bernie Sanders? He looked like Bernie Sanders, the bastard. It's like, it's Bernie Sanders. I want $17 minimum wage, Bedelia. So anyway. So she hears this and starts to have a flashback, and she rips roses from the top and then starts to walk towards the grave. And there you get the actual scene of what happened, where the old man is rapping on the cane saying, "Give me my cake, Bedelia." And in the meantime, Bedelia is just like trying to decorate the cake. And then the cake is just getting all obliterated with all this frosting. There's no sanity left in Bedelia at all. She comes out, raises the marble ashtray as Bernie Sanders looks at her, and then she slams it onto his head, saying, "Happy Father's Day." And you see this dude take this tumble, and then out fades out that scene. Bedelia then goes to the grave and talks to her father as if he was an asshole. So it's weird that she comes here every Father's Day just to berate her dead father.
Yes.
So Bedelia goes to take a swig of the bottle, and as soon as she does that, a hand emerges from the grave. Yes. And then you get that big old boom with the piano. Scary.
Yes. And then, like the hand, how it looked, it looked like crusty old macaroni and cheese covered in ketchup. And it was like just how it came up. And then when he crawls out, you see his mouth move, and he goes.
Because after so many years of being dead, he's still, if she just came and brought him cake, he might have left her alone.
I think so. He just sweet tooth.
Yeah, he's hangry. That's the problem. So starts choking out Bedelia over the smoky ass grave, and then cut back to the rich white people again, getting drunk and dancing.
Ed Harris's moves, dude. Like he does like this thing where he goes, and I'm like, what the fuck is that, Ed? And it's so funny because you just know that he was just like, fuck this dancing, fuck this disco bullshit. Yeah. I don't want to do it.
Hank decides to go out to the graveyard area to find Bedelia because now they've waited for way too long. Hank is continuing to drink obsessively and dances his way to the grave.
And then drinks that grave booze.
That's right.
Who the fuck goes to the grave, finds booze, and goes,
"Oh, sure." He's all excited about it. Takes a drink and then accidentally slips into the grave.
Yes.
This guy is so obliterated drunk, he has no idea what's going on, decides to laugh, and all of a sudden the headstone above him starts to move forward.
Yes.
And you get that whole like, what the hell's happening type thing with the music playing. And then he sees the shadow of the father, looks forward, and the father is literally pulling the gravestone with the force of Star Wars.
The force.
It was Darth Vader. Darth Vader wants his cake. The gravestone then falls onto Hank's face, and you hear the most disgusting squishing now.
Just squelch. But the best part of that scene is when the father's walking away and you hear that laugh.
Yeah.
Oh God, that laugh is haunting. It's like ha 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 ha, and you're just like, ew.
Yeah, it's gross. It sounded like he was still gargling on blood or something like that. Yes. And it's weird because the first 3 episodes of this film all had that little gargling sound.
Yes.
In one of their characters, at least. Like all the first 3 of them had that little sound. So I imagine the sound guy is all the same for all these things. Sylvia then goes looking for Mrs. Danvers, who is the housekeeper, the person who is cooking the food. Trying to find Mrs. Danvers, she goes into this kitchen area that the lights are all turned off. The things are still on the stove. Water is boiling, and she's like, Mrs. Danvers,
Mrs. Danvers, Mrs. Danvers,
and then says, Mrs. Dan, and then you see Mrs. Danvers answering the call. Sylvia then freaks out, closes the door. Mrs. Danvers falls face forward. Sylvia runs right into the hands of the awaiting father, who then says, I want my cake, and snaps her head.
Yes, turns her head on backwards.
Oh, yes, great. Richard and his sister are the only ones left that are still waiting for everybody to come back. Cass convinces Richard to go with her to look for everybody. Richard reluctantly agrees. They go out to the kitchen, find all the darkened lights, things still on the stove, and Richard says, are we conserving energy? Not thinking the fact that all these people that have gone out somewhere have never came back.
Yes, I love that line, though, because he says it like such a dick. Are we conserving energy?
We're conserving energy. He's preppy. You know, we wanted them all to die. He's a preppy
douche.
We wanted them all to die. As they attempt to go to another door, out comes the father with the head of Sylvia on the platter with frosting and candles sticking out, saying, it's Father's Day.
And I got my cake.
And
oh
Richard,
my God!
Yeah, Richard lets in this inward gasp of a scream. Oh my God! And he says, Happy Father's Day. And then it turns into a still image of a comic book, and the scene fades away.
Yeah,
that was Father's Day. Awesome story. It was cool. It was
really cool. I love that one. I love that one. This next one is called The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill.
Yep.
And this one is great because it actually stars Stephen King in this little story. And dude, Stephen King is so good in this part. So it starts off, the comic kind of cartooniness is kind of fading away, and you see this like guy in his farmer's overalls, and he's looking at the sky, and you see this meteor come flying to the earth, and it lands right in his farm. And Jordy Verrill looks at it, he goes, holy oh Jesus! And sure enough, he touches it and he burns his fingers, and he starts sucking on his fingers, and then he has this flash, this like idea, and he goes, I wonder how much they pay for this at the college. And it goes to this flash. The guy's like, damn good looking meteor, Mr. Verrill. How does $50 sound? And then, Jordy Verrill, he wants a lot of money. He goes, 200. Not a cent more, not a cent less. Then Jordy comes back from his flash, and he goes, I got to cool the son of a bitch off. That's the ticket. And he goes and he fills up a bucket of water, and he looks at his fingers, and it looks like he's got chlamydia on his fingers. He does.
The meteor gave him herpes. That's exactly what I put on my notes. The meteor gave him herpes.
So Jordy Verrill takes the bucket of water, he throws it on the meteor, and the meteor cracks right open. And now he goes, he says his famous line, oh, you done it now, Jordy Verrill, you lunkhead.
Lunkhead.
And he goes back into his vision. He goes back to the Department of Meteors, and the guy says, I wouldn't give you 2 cents. And then it's great because like Jordy Verrill's like trying to cover the meteor with his hat because he's so ashamed of it.
He's so ashamed of the meteor.
So it comes back, and Jordy decides, well, I still got to try. And he starts dumping out this blue liquid from the meteor onto the ground. And he gets some on his hand, and he like goes, meteor shit.
That's line number 3. Well, maybe 4.
Line number 4. It's like he says so many, and it's so good. And he just dumps all this shit into the crater. And Jordy's watching wrestling, and he's drinking his beer, and he looks on his finger, and he noticed like some green shit growing on his finger, and he's concerned. And he realizes, oh shit, those are the fingers that have the moss, and then he goes, "Oh, Jordy Verrill, you lunkhead, you been." And he runs to the bathroom and he looks at his tongue, and sure enough, he sees some green moss growing on his tongue. Gross, right?
Great. It was
gross.
Great.
So now we cut outside, and you see vegetation and all this weird grass just growing everywhere, and it kind of shows Jordy Verrill inside, and he's kind of scratching his back on the door, and he's like, "Lordy, don't it itch?" So he's sitting down, he's drinking his screwdriver, and eventually he passes out. And now he wakes up, and he's got like this full green moss beard, and he's like, "Oh, I thought I was such a crazy nightmare." And then he kind of looks around, he sees all this shit growing all over his house. And he runs into the bathroom, and you just hear him go, "Oh!"
And so he thought of something really like a great idea.
It would be a good idea if I took a bath. So he goes into the tub and he starts undressing, and he's got the water, and it's so funny because it shows the water and it just looks like it's glistening.
Yeah,
it's like they put like glitter in it or something.
Beautiful.
It looked like the most comfortable, most relaxing, most enjoyable bath ever in this just shitty trailer park looking house. Only to see this ghost come into the vanity mirror, and it's Jordy's dad, who's been dead for like 3 years or something. And basically the ghost says, "You're not going to get in that water, are you, Jordy? It's the water is what it wants. You get in that tub, you might as well sign your death warrant." And then he basically, Jordy realizes, he's like, "I'm a goner already, aren't I, Daddy? Daddy?" And the ghost disappears, and Jordy's looking at the bath water like
like a dog waiting for the treat.
Yeah. He's looking at the bathwater, and Jordy Verrill does what we all know he's going to do. He jumps in the fucking bathwater. So he's in the bathwater. He's like, "Oh, better." And now we go to the next morning, and you see the vegetation completely overgrown all over the house, all over the farm, and you're kind of seeing scenes in his house, and it literally looks like somebody went to Lowe's, grabbed a bunch of sod, and just threw it all over the house. We go into the kitchen, and you see all this overgrown stuff, but you see something start to move, and you're like, "Oh my God, it's the fucking Grinch." He grabs the shotgun, and you hear that raspy breathing that Andy discussed in the first one. And he grabs the shotgun, and he's saying, "Please, God, let my luck be in just this once." And he pulls the shotgun to his head, and luckily he fires it, and it blows his head off. So now we see the comic hit, and all of a sudden it fades, and that is the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill.
Awesome story. It was an awesome story. It was so well done. And you really kind of felt bad for this loser in this little hick trailer park thing. And you could tell he was lonely. He didn't have any kids, didn't have a wife. He had nobody except for more than likely an abusive father who nobody cared about him. And he was always having bad. He was basically he was Al Bundy, in the trailer park. And it was kind of sad. But in the end, when he blows his head off, you get that sense of, in a weird way, you're kind of happy for him, You're like, okay, at least
you're happy that he finally got one thing went right for
at
him.
least something went right, and that was his head exploding all over the ferns behind him. But hey, what happened is just different to everybody, and it was kind of a waste, you know what I mean? He would have made a good Christmas tree. But so the next story we have is called "Something to Tide You Over." And so first of all, this is Leslie Nielsen's. Leslie Nielsen, before the Naked Gun movies, was into dramas a lot of romantic dramas. And a lot of people don't know that about Leslie Nielsen, but he was very much a very serious actor. This scene that he portrayed is incredibly scary.
Let me just throw this in real quick before you go into the story. But I was very enthralled when I first saw this because he was very serious. You're right. He's very scary. But then I read a fun fact about this one. Did you know that Leslie Nielsen had a fart machine in his pocket the entire time? And during the shooting, he would let it go off during rehearsals, and just before George Romero would call action.
he went on talk shows with this fart machine. There's YouTube footage of him like on talk shows with a fart machine, and he's just like playing it off like, I don't know.
I don't know. Was that you?
Yes. What an awesome dude this guy was.
Yes.
So we open with Richard knocking on Harry's door.
Yes.
Who was played by Ted Danson.
Wentworth.
Wentworth. Wentworth. Harry then opens the door. The chain is there, and Richard basically says, you're going to let me in, and if you don't, something very nasty is going to happen to Becky. Yeah. So obviously something is askew. We don't know who Becky is. We find out because then it cuts to Harry then talking to Richard saying, okay, well, you found out everything. You know everything. We were going to tell you anyway, and yada, yada, yada. So we get the semblance that Richard is actually the husband of Becky who is cheating on him with Harry. Richard then comes inside and shows Harry a audio cassette of Becky saying, please come.
Please, he's got me.
He's got me. If you don't
please
come, please come. I'm coming. So we have, like watching this as an older guy, you're like, okay, it kind of sounds, but whatever. It is what it is. So Harry then says, what have you done with her? And Richard basically says, I'm gonna take you basically to show you.
Yeah.
So we cut to Richard taking Harry to the beach to show him Becky,
which is nice. They had a nice day.
They had a nice picnic. He brought blankets.
They had finger sandwiches. I love those.
Love those things. Egg salad. So just imagine taking Harry to the beach, going to egg salad. It's like, it's all good.
Yeah, Rebecca's right there.
She's right over here. She's by the deviled eggs. So Richard then takes Harry on top of the hill, shows him what's at the bottom of the hill, and it appears to be a hole with a shovel bound into the sand.
Yes.
Harry then says, well, what is that? Richard says, what do you think it is? It could be the burial mound of Our Lady Fair. And then Harry then runs over to the hole, but the hole is completely empty.
Yes. It's Harry just a big hole in the ground.
It's just a hole in the ground. We don't know why he would take him there, but here he is. Harry then turns around with the shovel to go to hit Richard. Richard then pulls out a gun. Harry then says, this has gone far enough. Richard says, no, it hasn't. If you want to be a hero, I suggest you remember the Lady Fair.
Yes.
Harry then puts down the shovel. Richard then, pointing the gun at Harry, says, jump into that hole.
Yeah.
And then the music hits.
You forced me to shoot you, Harry. Sorry.
Harry then reluctantly jumps into the hole. Richard says, good boy, Harry. Now kneel down and start pulling the sand into the hole.
Could you imagine?
That's scary.
Could you imagine? That's like one of my fears.
Yeah. Being buried alive? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants it. Nobody wants that to happen.
No.
And Harry even says, like, you're not going to bury me alive. And Richard says, no, I'm just trying to incapacitate you. Then you can see Becky. We then cut to Harry, who is completely up to his neck in sand, being visited by Mr. Krabs. And he's right next to him saying, hello, I like money. So that is my biggest fear is crabs. I fucking hate crabs.
Stay away from Vegas.
They are hard-shelled lobster. They are hard-shelled spiders. Richard then comes back with a 1980s TV with a really fat back, runs cable apparently all the way from his own house, slams it in front of Richard's face or in front of Harry's face, and then says, it's showtime, and shows Becky being obliterated by all of this ocean water. I love how Harry says, Becky! And then Richard says, oh, well, she can't hear you. She lost the coin toss. I had to bury her further down the beach. Like, what? Do you imagine like the demented mind this guy had flipping a coin before the day started, Richard then talks to Harry and says, there's a chance you can get out of this. The tide might even set you free as long as you don't lose your head. It looks like she's losing hers. And you can tell she is panicking and she is scared. And he's basically telling Harry, you can get out of this if you just stay calm. But do you feel how hard your heart is beating? How fast? And that's going to make it harder to hold your breath, isn't it? That's scary.
Yes.
That is scary.
Creepy.
That is very, very creepy. Richard then leaves. And you see water start to come in on Harry's face. I love how Harry is like, Richard, please. As if that was going to be the coup de grace. If Richard would be like, okay, you had enough.
You know what? Yeah.
Yeah. He said, please, at least. That's fine. We cut back to Richard at home watching Harry and Becky getting buried by this ocean water. And he is laughing hysterically as he's drinking his rum and Coke or whatever he's drinking. Richard then goes back home. And while he's looking through his tapes, he then hears Richard again. He looks around and he can't find anybody, but you do see silhouettes of shadows that are kind of creeping out from the other side of the curtain in Richard's living room.
Yes.
The living room door opens slightly and you can see the arms of people that have now entered Richard's house. Richard hears something and gets the gun and says, is that you, Wentworth? Need I remind you, dear boy, I have the gun. Richard then says, I'll shoot you dead. And he opens the door and they come in and says, you can't shoot us dead, Richard. We're already dead. And we want to see you
raspy voice
at the beach. We want to see you at the beach. And they said, it's showtime. And Richard is just continuing to fire, blowing out Harry's eye, and just blood and all this crap is going down. Obviously, nothing is being affected.
Ocean water.
Oozing water. Yeah, it was great.
Yes.
Richard runs away to the adjacent room, locks himself inside, turns around, and there they are again. And they said, if you don't panic, if you can hold your breath, if you can hold your breath, if you can hold your breath. We then cut to Richard at nighttime with being buried up, completely up to his chin. And he says, I can hold my breath for a long time.
A long time.
The tide goes in, the image stills, it turns into a comic. And then we fade out. And that is something to tide you over.
Yes.
Great. First of all, I this is a little bit different than the other ones where it's not like super. I mean, at the end, it's obviously very, kind of like supernatural type thing. But really, the whole story is really about Richard and his insanity.
It's like psychological. It's like
very
holy shit. What if somebody actually did that to somebody?
Oh, crazy.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's freaky. It's definitely freaky.
So story number 4, my favorite one, The Crate.
This is it.
So good.
I didn't like this story. I didn't dislike.
You didn't like this one?
I didn't dislike this story. It's just my least favorite of the 5.
Really?
Yeah, I don't.
So I thought something that tied you over would be your least favorite one, because that's actually my least favorite one.
Really, I liked something that tied you over. To me, The Crate was just like, I could skip it if I'm watching Creepshow for like the 100th time. Yeah, it's not one of my favorite ones.
Oh man, well then I'm glad I'm talking about it, because you would have been like, The Crate. Okay. We open up, the comic book starts to fade, and we see this janitor, and he's kind of like tossing something up in the air. And when it comes back down, he drops it, and it's a quarter, and it rolls underneath this staircase at Amberson Hall, which is kind of like this college.
He said, what he said? I'll tell you what he said, because I remember, this is the only line I like in this. Well, there's a couple scenes I like, but I'll tell you what he says. He says, fuck a diddle. Fuck a diddle. I'll give it to the janitor. He's creative.
So Mike the janitor, he gets his flashlight, he shines it into underneath the stairs, and he notices that he sees this crate. And he goes inside and he's looking at the crate, and I believe it says like 1834 Arctic Expedition. And now we go to this party, and now we see just this raging bitch. And this is Wilma, played by the legendary Adrienne Barbeau. I love Adrienne Barbeau.
So do I. And my absolute favorite thing of hers was Escape from New York. But yes. she's insanely good at everything she does.
What about The Fog? I thought she was so hot in The Fog.
Hot? I don't know if she was ever hot.
Yeah, she had like that mom kind of Farrah Fawcett hair. Oh yeah, Adrienne Barbeau was doing it for me back in the day, baby.
Okay, all right, okay. No,
so Wilma has like this like fucking like I don't know like weird 80s mullet rat tail kind of hair.
Yes, too. It was awesome.
And we see Wilma, and we also see her husband Henry. And we also see Dexter, who is one of the college professors. And we assume Henry's a college professor too, but we don't really know what he does. And now we see a quick phone call with Mike, the janitor, talking to Dexter. And he says, well, you know, the crate says 1834 and says Arctic expedition. I thought you'd want to come check it out. So Dexter, obviously curious, he leaves the party and he leaves his friend Henry to be with his wife Wilma and all these, you know, snobby looking white people who just came for the free cake. And Henry pulls out this fucking Dirty Harry like Magnum special and he goes, Wilma, and she goes, what? And he shoots one right between her eyes. And everybody like kind of looks down and looks up at him and just goes,
bullseye.
And yeah, you have one person go, hell of a shot. Bullseye.
Bullseye.
Well, as Henry is taking all these applause, he's like, yeah, that felt good. Yeah. Well, now he wakes up. Wilma's yelling at him. Henry, did you tell one of the boys with the monkey suits to get the car? I swear to God, Henry. So they bring the crate out. They put it up on the table, and now they're starting to pop it open. They're taking off the locks. They're starting to take off the top. Mike, the janitor, thinks he sees a couple of emeralds. And when you look at it, you see these eyes. And he goes to reach in. And all of a sudden, you see him get grabbed. And he starts getting pulled into this crate. And now the crate tips over. And Mike's arm is hanging out of it. And he's just kind of like. Well, all of a sudden, the top of the crate pops open. And you see this baboon-looking creature. And later, I think they call it a Tasmanian devil. So that's what we're going to call it.
Sure.
And I was just like, yeah, all of a sudden you pop it open. Fucking Taz from Looney Tunes goes, fucking grabs Mike the janitor, pulls him into the crate, and you see him getting eaten, and you see all this blood dripping down as Dexter whines and wails like a little baby. He then runs up and he finds Charlie, who's like I guess one of the students there, and he's like on the honor roll or some shit. So Charlie finds a shoe underneath the staircase, and it's right in front of the crate, and he sees it. Like it looks like it kind of went through a hay baler, and what he wanted to do, he wanted to grab it and try and measure the bite marks so he can kind of see what's inside the crate. So he grabs the shoe, and now all of a sudden you see this shadow coming over him. And all of a sudden you see this crazy Tasmanian devil open up its mouth and it grabs Charlie. Like Charlie tries to get away, but it grabs him and it scratches his face. And the way he scratched it was,
yeah.
And it was like, ew.
It was awesome.
So Charlie can't believe, or Dexter doesn't believe what he sees. He runs away and leaving Charlie to a very gruesome fate. So Dexter runs back to Henry's house, and now he's super frantic. He needs someone to talk to. He needs his friend. And Dexter tells this entire story about how he thinks it was like a Tasmanian devil, and it came out of the crate. And he was talking about like, yeah, if we could like kick it off into this quarry, we might be able to kill it. And the entire time, Henry is listening to him like, and you know what Henry's thinking. So Henry pours one more drink for Dexter, and he pops a pill in it. And the next scene, you see Dexter passed out, and Henry's writing a note. Well, Wilma comes home. So now we start to hear what Henry's note was. And basically what Henry was saying is Dexter got into some trouble. He maybe either groped or molested a young girl at Amberson Hall. And the girl actually crawled up into underneath the staircase because she was so scared. So he actually asked Wilma, like, hey, could you come down and kind of talk to her? You're so good at these things. And, you know, after all, what would I do without you? And, she was just like, what indeed, Henry? And she takes her nasty ass milk drink and she goes driving down to Emerson Hall, being a bitch the entire way.
Yes.
And as she's coming, Henry's still cleaning up everything. And he's cleaned the lab. He's cleaned the stairway. He's cleaned the hallway. And he just finished. And Wilma comes to the top of the steps. And Wilma comes down. And Henry starts to explain what happened. And the girl got scared and like went underneath the staircase because she's all curled up and she's scared. And Wilma starts to go under there. And as she does, Henry's like, you're so good at this kind of thing. You're so, and he runs and he pushes her ass under the stairs, and he starts just basically going cuckoo bananas, and he starts like grabbing Billy or Wilma, and he starts slamming her against the crate. Wake up, whatever it is you are, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And Wilma's just like, now she starts belittling him as a man, basically saying that he's no good in bed, no good as a man. Well, apparently the creature didn't like the sound of the shrieking voice of Wilma, and he comes out and he grabs Wilma and he almost kind of looks up at Henry and like kind of goes, thanks. And then it shows Henry and he goes, ooh, just tell it to call you Billy. And he locks the crate and he starts to pull it out. And you kind of hear his, kind of like his alibi. And he's like, it's almost hellishly perfect. There's no one at Emerson Hall. And he's like, and I also thought, like, how much could it eat? Was it still hungry? So now he's driving down to the quarry, as Dexter told him to. And he gets to the quarry and the monster tries to come out again, but then the monster kind of goes back in and he kind of like sounds defeated. So Henry throws.
This is a moment where I really felt you could feel pity for the monster.
You really could.
After all the bullshit that monster did, but you kind of feel bad for him. He's just
really do.
That hurts your heart,
Yeah, you're like, man, the poor monster. He's just hungry. I mean, he's just doing what he does in 1834. Fucking eats people. He's a fucking Tasmanian devil. Down in Tasmania.
Tasmania.
So he kicks the crate into the quarry, a flooded quarry. And now we're back in Henry's study, and Henry's talking to Dexter, and he's like, so what are you going to say about it, Dexter? And Dexter's like, well, nothing. And then they play chess, only to go back to the quarry. You see the crate bust open, and then you see the eyes. And then we end. It's so good.
It's not. It was, it's a good little monster fun flick. But to me, it was just like, I don't know. I can't describe why I don't necessarily love that episode, but it's just not, to me, it just doesn't fit well. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't fucking know. I'm just pessimistic. Yeah, definitely not my favorite. But everybody
wrong.
Yeah, no, we'll see. So now we enter my absolute favorite one of the entire film.
Yeah.
This is my absolute favorite. Called They Are Creeping Up on You. They're creeping up on you. A warmful tale about about a germaphobe who is a rich tycoon who obviously owns this gigantic conglomerate company.
Yes.
Who is absolutely terrified of bugs.
Yes.
So we open with our star of the show named Upson Pratt, who is killing a cockroach and talking to his associate George about Norman Gassenmeyer. Norman Gassenmeyer is a person who at least the former owner of a company in which Pratt had bought out. Realized that there was nowhere to stop the merger. Norman Gassenmeyer shot himself. Yes. This happened about an hour ago. George tells Pratt the news, and Pratt says, wonderful.
Wonderful.
Now we won't have to offer the old fart a seat on the board of directors. Yes! We then cut to Pratt spraying more cockroaches as Mrs. Gassenmeyer gives him a call.
Yes.
To inform him that she wants him dead. Mrs. Gassenmeyer announces what her name is, and Pratt says, Mrs. Gassenmeyer, how are you?
How are you?
Mrs. Katzenmeyer, how are you?
I hope they keep hell hot for you.
I hope you die.
I hope you die. I love how she is just going on, and he is playing this violin.
Yes.
And Mrs. Gassenmeyer, Mrs. Kassenjammer,
Mrs. Katzenjammer.
He said, "Can you tell me who gave me my personal number? I'd like to fire him." And she said, "It was in my husband's address book." And he says, "Oh, I can't fire him, can I?" So then we cut to Pratt eating some hot cereal or something like that.
Now, what was that?
I don't know. It's weird. If I were to take a guess, it was like pureed Raisin Bran.
That's what I thought it was too.
He's an old man. He likes his pureed food. I'm just going to say it's pureed Raisin Bran.
He likes Raisin Bran because he's old.
He's old. He likes the fiber. He needs it for his gut health. But he looks down at the spoon and he says, "Those aren't raisins." So he goes over to the box of cereal, and then you start to hear this weird that it's music, but it's not music. It's like this squeaking and this scratching, this
yeah.
And he dumps out the box of cereal, and out come like 6 or 7 cockroaches.
Yeah.
We then cut to White, who rings the doorbell and tells him the exterminators could be there at 11:30. We get a deeper insight into Upson Pratt's character here as he commends White for the job he does. He notices that people in service jobs often do people of color. People of color? And he's not talking about this man's personality. This is a black guy.
Yes.
People of color.
Yes.
I love how White is just completely, humoring him, and it's so obvious he's being sarcastic. It's like, thanks, Mr.
Pratt, sir.
The power then goes out, and we see a bunch of silhouettes of cockroaches inside the light fixtures above Pratt.
Yes.
Pratt then calls the police and tells them that he has this big old emergency, and they're saying, well, we can't get to it tonight and blah, blah, blah. This is not a slow night. There's real emergencies out there. And I love this. In this scene, you really see this actor. I don't know the actor's name. He was in Christmas Vacation. He's a great actor.
Yes. But
he says, look, you don't understand. These are cockroaches, the biggest ones I've ever seen.
This has got to stop.
Yeah, this has got to stop. And it was just like, it was really scary.
No, you don't understand. These are cockroaches. The biggest ones I've ever seen. This has got to stop. This has got to stop.
And the actor's name, E.G. Marshall.
E.G. Marshall. Thank you very much for that. E.G. Marshall, rest in peace. You were an amazing.
You are an amazing actor, sir. Thank you for everything that you've done.
It was awesome. Pratt then calls White, who was in charge of the exterminator. White lets him know that he is actually stuck in the elevator and he can't get upstairs.
That's from the power outage.
Pratt is then shitting his pants, and his shit is full of roaches. Pratt then retreats back to this private glass chamber that he happens to own. This germ-proof chamber, this airtight room.
You'll never get in here.
Yeah, you'll never get in here, never. And you're gonna pay, and then you'll be sorry.
and then you will be sorry.
He then gets a call again from Mrs. Gassenmeyer. As soon as he says, "Talk to me," he notices the blanket in that room is starting to kind of jiggle a little bit.
Yes.
We then hear Mrs. Gassenmeyer says, "I hope you die," as Pratt reaches down into the blanket and yanks off the cover as she says,
"I hope you die."
And it was just the most horrifying thing in the world. It was really scary. The cockroaches then all come down to the floor. You get this really cool shot of the cockroaches very close up on the floor, running towards the camera, all descending up to Pratt's body, going all over the place. Pratt is so scared he has a heart attack.
Yes.
And as he falls, we hear another "I hope you die" from Mrs. Gassenmeyer.
Yes.
Super scary. Super scary. The power then goes on, and all the roaches are gone. And something I forgot to mention here, at one point, Pratt, he tries to squash one of the roaches earlier on in the episode, and then he looks at his glove, and the glove is completely clean, which is really interesting to know.
Oh, yeah.
So really what we're talking about here is not necessarily these attack from this roaches, but perhaps this is really a story of a germaphobe who has finally lost his mind. Because then we get the sense when the power comes back on, there's no more roaches, then you get the idea that maybe this is a guy who just lost his mind and he's imagining this whole thing.
Yes.
Until we get a close-up of the body of Pratt, whose chest starts to kind of bounce a little bit and his head starts to squirt out blood.
Yes.
And we don't know what the hell's going on, but then out from his chest and his mouth just come all of these roaches. And they must have been somewhere inside of a dummy's body with an air compressor or something, pushing all these roaches out. And it just tears his whole, like, his head apart, is coming out of his mouth, his chest. It was disgusting.
Yes. And then it was in White. Remember, White was trying to, what's the matter, Mr. Pratt? Bugs got your tongue? Honky bastard.
Yeah, that's right. Bastard.
Honky bastard.
And we get a faraway shot of the room, which is just completely, it must have been like a foot and a half deep of cockroaches inside that room.
Thousands.
Swarming over, hundreds of thousands swarming over Mr. Pratt. And then the image stills, goes to the comic book image, and that is they're creeping up on you.
Yes.
My absolute favorite whole story of the entire film. It was incredibly scary, especially for somebody who has a cockroach phobia. This is one of those,
Oh yeah. Yeah, my wife could not watch it.
No, my wife was like really freaked out about it. We then cut back to the prologue, where a couple of trash guys are picking up trash, notice the Creepshow comic book, and start reading through it. They flip through the comic book and notice there's all these things you can send away for.
Yeah.
And they notice that the voodoo doll has already been sent away for. Don't know what the hell's going on there. We then cut back to Billy's father and his mother. This is morning time. Billy's father is getting ready for work, talking about he couldn't sleep really because his neck is all hurting or whatever. As Billy's mother is ironing his shirt, she notices a piece of the cloth missing from the shirt.
Yes.
Which is really cool. We then cut to Billy, a very quick glimpse of Billy sticking a pin into this voodoo doll with that piece of cloth wrapped around the doll.
Yes.
Cut back to Tom Atkins going like this. And Billy says, I'll teach you to throw away my comic books.
Ready for another shot, dog?
And we finish the entire movie, with Billy stabbing his dad's voodoo doll in the neck.
Yes.
And that is Creepshow.
That's Creepshow, baby.
Yeah. What do you think of the movie?
Oh my God, I love Creepshow. Like I said, when I saw this as a kid, I did not rent this. I borrowed it from my uncle. He had it, and I just kind of remember seeing the box, and I'm like, that looks so cool, because it looked like the Crypt Keeper, and I knew Tales from the Crypt. So I took it home and I watched it, and I was blown away. And after I saw that, I just remember I'm like, I want everything to do with horror.
Yes. Yeah.
I love Creepshow.
Great movie. My mom showed it to me at a very young age, and I'm very thankful for it. And
God bless her.
I try to show my kids. They weren't even into it. They weren't scared or whatever. They just didn't want to watch it. I was like, you don't know real good movies. So it is what it is. So that was a good pick for me. I'm happy we got that. And thank you all, everybody who voted for that. If you want to vote for our next movie, that will be in the description of this video. So make sure you check that out. I know that's going to be Thrash's picks.
Yes. And I'm going to tell you what the genre is going to be. We're doing golf comedies.
Check out that description right now and make sure you vote for our next thing. We will be doing a live stream of this show, probably, I would imagine, by the next show, but we'll see. We're waiting on 100 subscribers. So big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to us so far.
Yes.
If as soon as we get to 100 subscribers, we'll do our very first live stream. And if it goes well, then we'll continue to do live streams. We'll do live stream of all the Raw, and then we'll edit it for YouTube and make sure it's all like pretty on YouTube. So that'd be nice.
And then you can tell me that I'm wrong in my predictions.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yes. All right. Well, in any event, Thrash, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate that. And thank you all for watching. I appreciate that. And we'll see you next time for the Retro Rental Review.